Welcome, everyone. This is Enough to Keep Going. This is a deep dive podcast on the Enough to Keep Going network. This is episode 3, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. So this is our deep dive podcast for the week of July 23rd, 2018. The point of the deep dive podcast here is to run through some news of the last week, pull out some headlines that are of interest to us or important to the industry. There's a lot that's gone on, even in the doldrums of summer. We have some lawsuit news here this week with Nintendo suing some ROM sites. We've got all kinds of different things. We just got off the trail of Steam sales and PlayStation mid-year sales, and we're now in the middle of Xbox sales. So there is plenty going on, but we've got some news to talk about, and then we're going to spin that news out and dive deep into a topic related to one of the stories, or maybe even a couple of the stories this week. So joining me this evening is Swissguard. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well.
Good. And along with us and putting on a hat for the occasion. Oh, look at that! Do you win the PUBG hat when you get a chicken dinner? Is that how that works, Prime?
No. This is official Xbox gear that I got on here.
Okay. So excellent. So, what's on the? Lift up your head a little bit there. What's underneath the brim? Is that just a sticker, or is that? Oh no! Just making a sound. Oh, look at! Oh, nice. That is official gear, and it's got yellow rims on the inside, some on the spines.
I didn't realize that they didn't have like merchandise that you could buy on Xbox until just recently. Like, because I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about it, so I was like, oh. So I checked it out and I found that, and cool. A Minecraft sweatshirt.
Way to support your favorite battle royale game. There you go. Excellent. Well, Prime, since you have the mic and the hat, I'm going to let you get started with our news for the week. So what's your first story?
All right. So some, I guess, Xbox-related news. So Roblox, the blocky, it's free-to-play game on Xbox, PC, and I believe it's on PlayStation. I'm not sure about that. This is an article I got from Gama Sutra. They are on track this year to pay out the devs of the game about $70 million this year, as long as everything kind of tracks out by the end of the year. Now you might think, okay, that's probably a lot of money, but Roblox is a, I guess, user-generated game, so they give the devs the tools to create their own game, or I should say people, not just devs, but they give people the tools to create their own games, and that's pretty much what it is. You go on there, and there's just a mishmash of all kinds of different games. I'm sure you can find battle royale games. You can find, just a racing game or just kind of silly stuff too. Yeah, they talk. The other thing they talk about in this article is that the people creating content has doubled, actually more than doubled, over the past year. So originally, or last year around this time, there was about 1.7 million creators, and this year there's about 4 million. So that's a pretty big jump there. And then also the payout is about excuse me, a little over half. So it was about 30 million last year. And like I said, as long as everything tracks, they got about 7 million coming out to them. So I think that's pretty cool. I dabble in it every once in a while. I know my son was big into it for a little while. He still plays it every once in a while too. Kids, they like to jump around in games and stuff. So, but he'll play it every once in a while too. But it's kind of a fun little game. You can kind of go in there and just kind of goof around and just have fun in.
So how many people creating content there?
Right now, there's 4 million.
Okay, wow. So I remember this title because this came up a couple news shows ago when we were talking about the Steam user base, right? Active users or number of users, and Roblox was up there in the top 10 or at least the top 15. Yeah. So I just in a quick search, so there's a news story about on Roblox back in 2012 that they had 100,000 concurrent users. So 6 years later, they've got millions of people creating content for it. So Definitely is a game that has held on for quite a while. So we've got another game that has held on for a while, but has come under some problems here just this past week. Swiss, what is your story here?
I picked this one up from IGN. It's For Honor. Ubisoft compensates players for DDoS attack. So apparently last week, Ubisoft tweeted that they're, quote, monitoring DDoS attacks impacting Ubisoft services and causing players to be unable to connect to games. And then they mentioned that the games, it focused on the game's connections and server latency. So obviously, basically the DDoS attack made it, rendered them effectively unplayable. What's interesting is, and it was not just For Honor. They attacked Ubisoft servers, so it ended up affecting also Far Cry 5, Ghost Recon's Wildlands, and Steep. But what I found was interesting is, kind of as a mea culpa, Ubisoft is giving away free digital content. So Ubisoft has announced that all For Honor players will receive 1,000 steel. And this is a quote from the IGN article. 2 scavenger crates and a 10 XP boost following the attack. So on the one hand, DDoS attacks, it's just, this is 2018. It's just part of the landscape. You know what I mean? Hackers, or I don't want to use the term hackers, script kiddies are going to script kiddie, and it's going to affect major internet infrastructure. So how much of that Ubisoft is responsible for? There are ways you can mitigate it, but you can't stop everything. So I guess this was just a nice little gesture by them. I don't know if it implies that they felt like they were in the wrong, but it's good to keep your player base happy because they'll find the next shiny object, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. That they can acknowledge that people were. It doesn't really cost them a whole lot to do the mea culpa, as you said, even if it wasn't necessarily their own fault. But here's a little bit of goodwill, right? It does not have to be the Sony PlayStation hack of 2011, 2010, somewhere around there, where everybody's account was compromised and you got a game or two out of it. So this is, in the era of digital content, it's pretty easy to hand out a few things to keep your fan base feeling good. So that's a good side, and Ubisoft definitely has taken care of their players with For Honor, and it even ended up got some mentions on stage this year at E3 as well. So another game where we've got the developer trying to build a gaming community and struggling a little bit more. So I've got a story here about layoffs at the Onrush developer. So Onrush was the kind of racing PvP game. So it necessarily wasn't a race game, but it was a driving player versus player game. It was actually, I played it in June and had a lot of fun with it. A lot more fun than The Crew 2. It plays out kind of like Overwatch with cars. A lot of different modes, but it's also a game that came out at full price and has been struggling to find an audience. So here, reported from Eurogamer, that there's an anonymous source that says the studio's been decapitated following the latest round of redundancies. And so this is a studio within Codemasters, the company, right? Codemasters, this is the same studio that's done a lot of other driving games, Drive Club. A number of people from Onrush also came over from the MotorStorm series. And so you've got the game company as Codemasters saying it's normal for a course of business for game teams to evolve and projects to launch and move into a service. People move on, right? That's it. So somewhere in the middle there is probably the truth, but this is a game that in sales numbers and in active users has struggled. And now we see where there we get some news story about people losing some positions at the company as they realize they don't need as many people to continue to support it, or maybe divert resources otherwhere because of other potential for projects. So we've got a game here that's only been out for 2 months that is struggling with Onrush, but we've got a game here, Prime, that you've been excited about that's been out for 2 years now. And we get some good information about. So tell me more about why I should go back to No Man's Sky.
Yeah, so along with the next update that they're going to be rolling out, which will come out when it releases for the Xbox tomorrow. They also announced today that they're going to be doing weekly updates to the title. So, and these are going to be more community focused challenges that they're going to do. Kind of like they do on Destiny and pretty much every game nowadays, where there's a set amount of missions or events that's going to happen, and if you do them, if you complete them, you'll just get in-game rewards. And as the creator Sean Murray said, and this is an IGN article I got this from when he was talking with IGN. This is not about loot boxes or microtransactions or anything like that. It's 100% free, so they'll do this for free each week. They'll update the missions or events and stuff, and you'll get these items. They didn't really say in the article here what the items would be. I'm assuming skins, maybe different things for your ship or bases and stuff like that. I don't know. Didn't really specify, but this will start a week after the game releases on July 24th. Well, game release for the Xbox or the big update for PC and PS4. Also, along with the weekly challenges, we'll be getting the Galactic Atlas, which is going to launch. Actually, it's supposed to launch today. So it's basically just a website with that will show all the in-game events on the galaxy map, and then you'll get a portal glyph address, which I'm not sure what that is, and it says which will allow visitors to specify locations, basically a point of interest. I'm assuming on the maps. So if you want a friend because you can play multiplayer, you will be able to play multiplayer, and this maybe you can put a specific planet on the map, and you guys can go meet up and do whatever you want. I suppose not just in this. That's not necessarily for the in-game events or anything. You can just do that anytime you want. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm pretty excited for this game. So this is just kind of like the cherry on top of the sundae for me, at least. And I know you had mentioned before when we were talking the show that you're kind of interested maybe to jump back in.
Yeah, I have. After looking at some of this stuff, my experience with No Man's Sky was such a singular experience that, right? I mean, I'm the one that wrote a little essay about it. It was this unique piece because I was so isolated in this world, and now watching some of the previews about the next update and how seamless some of the multiplayer stuff really is, and that you can party up with a group of 4. Suddenly, my singular experience that I had feels totally different, right? Like I'm struggling to survive and feeling alone on this planet, and now if I have the ability to work with 3 other people or team up with you, Prime, and some of the updates here allow people to share items within their inventory. So if I'm low on a certain mineral and you need it or I need it for life support, but you've got some, we can share back and forth and kind of keep us alive. There's a lot of different flight pieces that are really interesting in terms of everybody. Once you're instanced in the same world and in the same galaxy, you can pretty much go off into different solar systems within that galaxy and still be part of the same world, because you do warp between solar systems or destinations, and so it really seems like it creates a whole different gaming experience. So I am pretty tempted, and now my question is, do I go back and pick up a cheap copy of PlayStation 4 to be able to pick up my save, or do I pick something up here on Xbox and play with you? So yeah, so that is from one space story that's becoming a space opera to one that had the potential, or maybe still has the potential to be a space opera in Destiny 2. So a new story last week, Nathan Fillion, so this happened during San Diego Comic-Con, is Nathan Fillion, along with releasing a really fun little short film around Uncharted and him playing Drake, and taking on that role of Nathan Drake. That Nathan Fillion also announced that he will not be doing the voice acting for Cade 6 in the Destiny expansion, in which he dies, right? So that's not a spoiler. It's out there. It's all part of the promotional material, is that Cade 6, the character made famous by Nathan Fillion, the hunter, or the kind of glib and sarcastic hunter, that we end up with him not taking it. And in a fun little stroke of switching roles, is that the week that he releases his film playing Nathan Drake, voiced by Nolan North. It also was announced that Nolan North will take up the voice acting role of Kid 6. So, be interesting to see how that plays out. All right, so that kind of kicks us through the news stories of the week. Gentlemen, do you have any other news stories you want to toss out here before we dive into our topic?
One news story that I didn't put in the rundown because I forgot where I found it, but will tie into this topic, was Steam numbers for the past month. I believe, if I recall correctly, number one was Monster Hunter World, which surprised me a little bit because it's still, I mean, not still hanging in there. I mean, it's still doing strong.
Well, it just recently came out for PC this summer. So
okay. Sales numbers then, yeah. And then I think number two was PUBG. And I know that I think there's been kind of a little bit of a revival. I think there was some sales and some price slashings and whatnot. And number three is GTA 5. So
now there's a game that has,
yes.
the Roblox game that had a post about 6 years ago, definitely GTA 5. And GTA 5's just got another online expansion coming out tomorrow. And it brings back Gay Tony. Just saw a little trailer for it. So they continue to be a juggernaut. So yeah, that's a great segue into our topic, that idea of the long tail of the juggernaut, right? We've got a lot of stories this week. We've got layoffs at Onrush developers. We've got the 2-year-old game of No Man's Sky releasing a really big and significant update 2 years later. We've had stories in the past related to kind of the ability of small studios to hang on and create a community versus something like the For Honor and Ubisoft that you mentioned this week, Swiss, with being able to continue to support that and build that community over time. Ubi's been great for that with both For Honor and for Rainbow Six Siege. And so the idea of a long tail, the long tail of a game that has had a ability to grow its user base, and sometimes this happens, because it's been designed that way, right? That one of the biggest long tail games in recent years that Prime you are a big fan of is Rocket League, right? That game has, as it keeps coming to everything, it continues to sell well, but it kind of really got its big push when it was given away free during a month during PlayStation Plus, and that got everybody playing it. Kind of built a critical mass relatively soon, and gave them that kind of new experience with car soccer. But PlayStation Plus has tried to do the same thing with other games. Last year, it tried to do it with David Jaffe's big, or at least hyped, drawn to death, arena shooter. And within a month or two, it was announcing that the David Jaffe studio was cutting back people and then later closing down, right? So that idea of PlayStation Plus being able to build in an audience, you still need a good game to be able to do that. And that built-in audience of record sales in over 90 million sales lifetime with GTA and GTA Online definitely is a good example of that. So I guess the question, that's kind of an observation and bundling all these stories together. But a question that I have for you guys is, what's the game, like thinking about games that you're aware of, that you've played, that you've kind of bounced in and out of, what game has had a long tail and a growing user base that's really surprised you? But also on the flip side, what dead game, or maybe even just dying game, did you think would have longer legs? So I'm going to throw this to our Rocket League aficionado over here with Osiris Prime, and let's start with that first question of what game's long tail has really surprised you. What game has continued to grow and sustain itself that maybe on first guess or even first review you would have thought not possible?
Yeah, I don't know how I didn't think of Rocket League when I was thinking of this question. But another one, another good one, I think, is Minecraft. It came out, and that kind of ties in with other topics in the past about, kind of betas and previews, kind of being in the game preview, because it started out as basically a beta. It was kind of thrown out there. And then, they kept updating and updating, and, eventually, excuse me, it's just been, now this is this huge game. It's on like every, system known to man, refrigerators and all kinds of things. Who knows what else is on Raspberry Pi? So it's maybe not fridge, but it's a little device. But it's and obviously the creator of it, he sold it off at one point and went to Microsoft. And everybody thought, oh, you know what, that's the end of Minecraft. We'll move on. But Minecraft's taking lead on it. They pretty much left the studio alone, just to do their own thing, still just iterating. Every I don't know, maybe couple times a year that they do like a big huge update. Like they just dropped the aquatic update, which gives you like a bunch of stuff underwater that really wasn't there before. There's a few mobs and creatures that you can see and maybe harvest materials from, but pretty dead underwater. But now they have temples. Now they have shipwrecks that you can find down there, and just all this other stuff that you can find. So, excuse me. And they've just been doing this, since the day they started. And when I first saw the game, I mean, I think like everybody, you see the graphics first, obviously. It's like, oh, what is this? This is not going to work. I just kind of wrote it off, I even tried it, I think, at that point on the PC. I was just like, nah, it's not for me. And then years later, when it came onto the consoles, I was like, I want to give it another try. I have no idea why, because I didn't really like it at first. But I tried it, and I don't know if it was the controls maybe, because it's a little bit better control, I think, on the controller, because you can speed up and slow down a little bit better than you can on like a mouse and keyboard, as far as the movement, especially like when you're building things. So and that hooked me, and I kind of like the exploration part of it. Building stuff is fine, but I was never I could just do like a square little house and stuff like that. I can't make these the Starship Enterprise, 1/4 scale or whatever that they do on their Star Wars vehicles and stuff like that. But I like the exploration and just kind of making up my own story basically. Because now when I play with my son, that's a whole different experience. So that was probably the one that popped into my mind first when you brought this question up.
Nice. Okay. So Swiss. So yeah, I think Minecraft is a good example there, right? That this was a game that launched where you had to buy the client for PC, right? Back when it was an individual piece, and now it is on everything. So what game got you thinking about that has a longer tail or a growing user base that has kind of surprised you?
None of these games that kind of have long tails are in my wheelhouse. So I'm coming at this from a very different perspective, and I might throw some stuff out there that you guys are going to jump on me for. I was going to say Minecraft, but Prime stole my thunder.
Well, it can't be an E2KG show if we're not going to argue with each other a little bit.
Right. So here's the one that I'm going to throw out there is World of Warcraft. And, this game came out when, like 2005, 2006?
I'd go back, I think 4.
Okay. And I remember when it first came out, and I think my brother and I picked up copies, I think around the time of the Burning Crusade. So that might have been why it registers in my brain at that point. But actually, I don't even know when Burning Crusade came out. But
Burning Crusade 3rd expansion? 2nd expansion?
2nd expansion, I think.
I think you're right. Okay.
And then Wrath of the Lich King or Lich King.
Yeah. Yep, Lich King is.
But yeah, so I remember when it came out, there was some hype and some zeitgeist to it. Like you remember the commercials, they had like Mr. T, and he was like a night elf mohawk or whatever. So that was really fun. And people were excited. Like I think the style of the graphics and everything was cool, and my brother and I played it. I might have gotten to level 25 or 30. I don't remember. But it was just like, for me, I'm like, I can't devote enough time to be paying $15 a month for this. So we stopped, and my brother-in-law is like a big WoW fan, and he's always picking, like, he has like it's still like dusty on his shelf. I see it every time I happen to be at his place, but like the Cataclysm he got like the Cataclysm Super Edition whatever set, and like every year it's like he's like, oh, I'm like, you still play WoW? And he's like, well, my account's on hiatus until they release the next. I'm like, oh, they're doing another expansion? He's like, oh yeah, and they'll explain it to me. But it's and then he'll be on it for a number of months, excited, and all his friends will be, and yeah, it's just something that, you know, for me, like, it's just not my. I just don't. I can't play enough games to justify $15 a month in one game, and I don't like the subscription-based aspect of it. And I'm not a huge PvP guy, so it was cool for when I played it, but it's not for me. But it's just like, dang, they're still releasing expansions, and I know that there's another one about to hit in a month or so, or whenever it happens to be. But that's one that would surprise me, like that they're still pumping it out enough to where they're even releasing vanilla WoW, right? I think they finally acquiesced to the 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 fans, and so now there are multiple flavors out there.
Yeah, right. And even this week, the news story around the fact that you no longer have to buy the initial game, that all you have to do is pay the subscription, and you can play up until the most recent expansion just by paying the subscription. So you no longer have to buy the battle pack or whatever, you know, which again you could usually find relatively cheaply. But
right, that's a very modern way of doing software. I mean, we're all in like the real world with real jobs, and like Adobe and everybody, that's how you do software now.
It's surprising that it actually took this long. That's the thing, right? Like, you should be able to, it would have been a matter of a subscription-based service for such a long period of time. But I think it also speaks to how steady that fan base was, or even as it dwindled and is still in the, you know, the high, you know, over 5 million of 7 million people, the fact that they could still get away with not having it be just a subscription, but that you still had to buy an initial pack there. So that's not too insinuatory. You know, I think it is an interesting piece that you think that it had a longer tail than it deserved, or maybe not deserved, but than you expected, right? I think for me, the idea of WoW, even though I have never had a character past maybe level 5, is that it did a lot of things. There were other games before it, but it did that traditional Blizzard piece of refining and polishing it up really nicely. Now you got me thinking about what game has had a surprising, so much so that I had to mute myself because I had to stop and think.
I was worried that was on my end. I'm like, oh no, my internet.
No, that was me. So I had to. I'm going out. All right, I said it, guys. I'm moving on. I already said my choice. No. So I'm gonna say the game that surprised me is one that I am anticipating for this fall. Actually, is Warframe. So I picked this up and downloaded it in the height of my Destiny 2 new Xbox One kind of fever back in 2014, and it was clunky, it was awkward, it had menus to beat high heaven, and it reminded me more of something like WoW or something in an MMO space than this action fluid game that I was playing with Destiny. And so now to hear people talk about it, to be able to to have listened to Destiny podcasts over the years of people that have grown to love and fallen deeply in the world of Warcraft, not Warcraft, of Warframe, and now to have it come out on Switch, to get new life and a new console and some of the new stuff that just came out of TennoCon. That is a game that I never would have. It seemed kind of like an also ran free-to-play piece, and here's a developer, not a big name AAA developer, that has stuck with it and created something where there is a community around it. There is there were comics that have fleshed out its world, right? So I think that is a game for me that has surprised me in terms of its long legs.
When you said menus, a game immediately popped in my mind that I have never played, but I understand is still a thing, and that's EVE Online.
The spreadsheet game. Yeah. Yes. EVE Online is huge, right? I mean, we haven't necessarily had a whole big corporate takeover news story in quite a while, but that is a game where there is a whole economic, lifestyle around it. And, it's one of those where the gaming world has affected the real world as people and their corporations in game.
To go to your question about games that have trailed off, I don't know if Lawbreakers would count, just because I figured the pedigree behind that would have made it more of a, maybe I would have thought it would catch on, and it just completely fizzled before it even gained any legs. And then another game that I'm going to throw out there, and this is again one that I haven't played, but my other brother-in-law and his wife, my wife's sister, so my sister-in-law, I'll shout out to them over in England, and they are huge fans, or were, of Warhammer, and they used to play that every time we'd visit, or they'd visit us because it's easier for them to travel. But they'd always talk about playing Warhammer and stuff, and I never got around to playing it with them. I actually ended up playing Diablo 3. The three of us beat the game together. But so Warhammer was one, but I think it closed its servers. It has ceased to be. It no longer exists anymore.
Yeah, Warhammer Online, right? That
Yep.
was, it makes me think it had to be 2011, 2012, probably somewhere in there.
So maybe it only lasted about 3 or 4 years, but I think they were like, weekly at the very least players. So it had a dedicated fan base.
Oh, my bad. 2008 is when you
so
get some initial pieces, and it's fine. It's shut down in 2013.
Okay. So it's been a while. He was still talking about it. Like, he was visiting like in May, and he was talking about reminiscing about when he was playing Warhammer, and how at the end they consolidated the servers. So he said they released all the PvPers into a PvE server. So he was like, first they put, as my sister-in-law described it, she goes, first they put like the regular, like, normal PvPers in there that were kind of lone wolves, and they started kind of wreaking havoc. But then they put like the hardcore server guys into the same server. It was all in a single server, and he said he remembers like going up to a character and they said, "Hi, would you like to be my friend?" And then, like, they get an axe to the head, and she said it was like releasing the wolves among the sheep. But yeah, it's an interesting facet about these long tail games, about like how they end. Do they go out with a bang, or is it just kind of like the destiny of the universe where everything just expands to where it's a silent, slow, dark death? But,
yeah, there's lots of stories around MMOs, right? That you think remember stories about when they shut down the Matrix servers, Cities of Heroes, where they bring everybody together for one kind of final, party at the end. But then, one of the online multiplayer games, MMOs, that I played a lot of was Lord of the Rings Online, and that's been passed around and sold from developer now, from Turbine, and but it's still kind of going. But it is one of those where I don't even know if they're going to end up being able to finish the story from where they're at. So it'll be interesting to see. I have to now you got me thinking I should check back in on that game. But Prime, is there a game that you thought would have caught on, maybe in the first-person shooter realm or someplace else, that you're surprised that it never really had the legs that maybe fans anticipated?
No, actually, I had another online game, MMO. Actually, it was Star Wars Galaxies, which I was kind of surprised died as quickly as it did. And so this was, basically the Warcraft, or those kind of games of the Star Wars universe. And I remember when it first came out, everyone was excited. Oh, you can play, with your friends and do all this. You'll be in this big galaxy and all that stuff. And then, excuse me, there's the realization that you really had to work hard if you wanted to be a Jedi. I think that was like the first kind of down negative thing for the game, like when it initially released. I guess I played it a little bit. I think I might have played it like for a month or so, and I don't remember like the exact details of what you had to do, but you had really go, jump through hoops and do all this other stuff just to become a Jedi. Because I think you can just be like a bounty hunter and just some other classes that you could do, and then you could eventually like turn into one or something like that. And I know they did some updates and they had some expansions and stuff like that, but eventually I guess it just died. It just couldn't it wasn't making any profit evidently.
So I'm going to put on my Star Wars nerd hat here and say the reason that it died was the NGE, the new game experience. So this is an update that happened in 2005, and it kind of changed what you're talking about in terms of the Jedi experience, where it really was, the whole point where it was originally pitched back in the early MMO sphere of you could be the shopkeeper or the bounty hunter, and there were not going to be a whole lot of Jedi, and you had to go through all these quests. New game experience basically made it a class that you could select, or that you could do a very few things to become a Jedi. And so you suddenly had a whole different, they changed the player balance in the game. And I don't know that the game, I remember following it. I had dabbled in that game, but I followed it as a Star Wars fan, and it kind of just spiraled from there. And they did ship combat, and it never really recovered.
So to summarize, we can put this analogy out there. They effectively handed force powers to the player like Disney handed the force powers to Rey. It was unearned, and it destroyed the game, and as we see, the franchise is being destroyed as we speak.
Wow, we're going. So, okay. Yep. That's one way. So please leave your comments below. No, that's I gotta say, this week I had finished up season 4 of Star Wars Rebels. So this was right that Rebels is finished up back in the springtime, but I've been watching it and running, and I had more Star Wars vibes watching that and cheering along with the end than I did with some of the more recent movies. So anyhow, but so I'm going to take now you guys got me, I want to move off the MMO space, because I think the MMO space is littered with games that had big name IPs that trickled out, right? I mean, at one point I was thinking about the recent closure of Gazillion Studios and Marvel Heroes, that kind of Diablo-like action RPG with all the Marvel heroes thrown in. That was a game that I thought should have and probably could have lived on a lot longer in terms of the amount of property that they had into IP to play with, but it never really did. But I'm gonna take one and say that the game that I thought would have had longer legs than it did is as you can see in my shelf behind me with my amiibo back there, but Disney Infinity. So here is a big, yes, it kind of came in, also ran in the Toys to Life space, probably ramped up a little bit too much, too fast, put a whole lot of stuff out there. They had too much inventory, and that really was what killed them. But speaking of strong IPs, that they had a lot that they could have milked for game experiences, and the toy box mode where they built things, that was a game that could have lived on for quite a lot longer if the economics were a little bit different. Maybe if they didn't try to do everything all at once and try to push all their IPs out there in 3 years. So yeah, I had thought about, what are some other first-person shooters that maybe didn't resonate, right? You brought up Lawbreakers. There's a number of those that have tried to put together a multiplayer mode in a single-player story-focused game like BioShock 2, But I think that as I thought about games where I was surprised that they didn't last longer, that Disney Infinity was one of those. So. And that goes right back to Swiss. It goes right back to your comment there about Disney handing over the reins or pulling the plug, and they pulled it maybe a little prematurely there, as they have done with other game studios.
Do you think for Disney Infinity, because I know initially when it first came out, obviously you had all these figures, and maybe they listened to the fans a little too much because they obviously they had some limited prints or limited runs of figures and stuff like that. So they're like, all right, so let's for the next one, Disney Infinity 2 and 3, let's just throw everything as much as we can out there. I mean, I guess that's kind of another topic too of companies listening to the customers maybe a little bit too much sometimes, and they did it, and they did what the consumers wanted, but then they had all this extra inventory out there, and it was it's you could probably find it at the dollar store now for a lot of that stuff. So
Yeah, right. I would think that they ran, the spreadsheet there of, that graph of we put everything out there and we let people, we burn fast and quick, or do we trickle it out and try to build, do we do the Nintendo Amiibo aspect and you trickle things out in smaller quantities and you keep the hype going for a year around one line, or do you just stick it all out there and let people buy it because people are going to gobble it up? Yeah, that's a good question, Prime. That is a good question. I do wonder that, especially, I think they did kind of proliferate probably too quickly, and I think they certainly, right. This is quoted and part of the news story of when it went under, is that they certainly produced way more stock than they anticipated. Demand would be a whole lot higher than it was.
yeah, I can think of another maybe kind of shooter, I suppose. I guess it was, but the Aliens Colonial Marines, which had a lot of hype when it was first about to come out, but until it was released, and then just a terrible game, I guess. I never played it myself, but
that's a great one. Last week, this is the game that I was going to bring up for our news story last week, was the Aliens Colonial Marines, because Swiss, you had mentioned in last week's game or last week's podcast about how difficult it is, and there's always human error in coding. And so that news story from a couple weeks ago about the modder who took out the A in tether and teether, and suddenly the enemy AI played a whole lot better. So, gentlemen, any other games that you can think of that has surprised you that they haven't held on as long as, or maybe you look back fondly and wish they would have held on a little bit longer?
Actually, I can think of one that is actually I had it, now I lost it. Go ahead, Swiss. I gotta remember what it was now.
Yeah, I just, like I said, I haven't played as many of these types of community-based games as much, so I don't really have like holes in my heart of games that have disappeared from the digital world. It's I have I was kind of thinking about No Man's Sky, but I know that's reviving. This is kind of a different look at the topic, but unless Prime wants to go, I kind of had some thoughts on maybe the glass half full aspect of these types of things.
Well, you got to help me now, because what was the game on the 360 that it was originally like in the past it was like an RPG game, and then when they brought it out to the 360 it was like a shooter, basically just an online shooter. Do you remember what that was? I was thinking it was like Shadow something, but I don't think that's right. Can't remember what it's called right now.
Not Shadowrun.
Yes, Shadowrun. That was it.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the other one I was thinking that wished it would have done a little bit better, because I think at the time it was fine. It probably did all right, mediocre, but I would have liked to seen sequels and just kind of them building on that gameplay, which I guess like it's Overwatch and those other type of games kind of picked up that mantle, because
that's true. They really had.
Stuff like
there were different classes with different powers. Yeah, definitely that hero shooter. That's a good point. I hadn't thought about the lineage there to something like Shadowrun.
Yeah, because they basically changed the genre. So, and people were like, "Oh my God, why?" So.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's another topic. Is you have a genre, like you have a game in a genre. Like, does it make sense to completely do an entirely new? You have a game in an IP. Does it make sense to completely flip the genre or just come up with a new IP if you want to do something different? But I don't know.
I would like to talk about that one day.
Everything else in my brain isn't really like a single game, but more like intellectual properties. Like, I don't remember. I mean, have we had like a Baldur's Gate game?
So yeah, I would say that Pillars of Eternity, right?
Is that like officially Baldur's Gate, or is it just a hat tip to Baldur's Gate?
No, it's a hat tip, right? It's in that
Yeah.
same kind of vein of the Infinity engine.
But anyway,
I'm just looking at the release schedule for this fall and thinking about what else is out there that would need a community to build around. And I think there are going to be games like there are going to be people like your brother-in-law who are going to pick up Battle for Azeroth. No matter what, there are going to be people like Osiris Prime who are going to pick up a Call of Duty game, no matter what. Right, that they have a built-in audience there. I think that there are a lot of questions around what Red Dead Redemption has for an online mode, but I think it is foolish to think that there's not going to be one, given the reality that is GTA Online. I think the one game this fall that probably has, I don't know, I guess I shouldn't say the one. I would say the two games this fall that run the risk of cutting this line that we're talking about between not having the long tail or having a big enough property but not surviving are two games that Agasicles is kind of excited for. Is Fallout 76, right? We don't know a whole lot about it, but we know that it's going to be multiplayer focused, and Overkill's The Walking Dead, the kind of Left 4 Dead aspect within the Walking Dead universe. So both of those are going to need some player bases to survive and to be thriving. The question is are they going to be around and sustained long enough to do that? So there's my question looking forward, but I'm going to turn it back over to you, Swiss, to wrap us up here with your glass half full and give us some positivity here to end the night.
Well, you guys were talking about No Man's Sky, and Prime is excited about playing it, and I must confess that the game wasn't really too much on my radar back when the hype machine was chugging along at full steam. And I, followed the interesting rollout with a little bit of a, just kind of bemusement, because I thought, man, that's a shame. But it seems like it's really kind of bounced back. And after hearing you guys be excited about it, I'm thinking about picking it up and giving it a spin, just because it seems like it's starting to find its legs. And my thought was going to because you were talking Nathan Fillion news, Firefly. So if you remember, this is a TV show. I don't think it had much of an audience initially, and Fox famously canned it, and it gained a huge following after the fact. Well,
it didn't help that Fox never aired the episodes in order, right?
That is also difficult, so I mean, it didn't get a fair shake at the beginning. I'm not saying that No Man's Sky didn't, but the game now can stand on its own without having to be compared with what the hype machine and what people's insurmountable expectations were. And it's interesting to see how that game moves forward now that it's kind of, the people that are playing it for a reason, and not because Sony was putting the fellow at Hello Games, name escapes me, plastering him all over Conan O'Brien and whatnot. So game, I think that's a nice story. Like they could have let that crush them, emotionally and professionally, because they took a lot of heat and they kept working, and now it's starting to bear fruit.
So Sean Murray is the developer, the director of the game that you're talking about. He's actually made the rounds here on a number of gaming podcasts in the last week. Prime, you've got some thoughts here to take us home. So I think you're right, Swiss, that is a good point to pull it away from the hype. So I appreciate that comment. Prime, what do you got for us?
Just to expand on what Swiss was saying, I mean, he's got a good point. Like any other developer probably would have just shut it down. Like obviously like Onrush and whoever, all these other game companies that, they have one game that goes bad and they're just finished. But obviously, Sony didn't, Sony is not in charge of Hello Games. I believe that's what they're called. So they just kept going and they just kept, you know, iterating on the game itself, and it is. I don't know. I think it's a pretty good success story. I mean, they're still. I mean, when they first announced this game back on the PS4 and PC, I had a feeling that hopefully it was going to come on Xbox, because every time they asked them about it, they kind of just danced around it and didn't really say anything about it. So I was like, okay, it's going to come to the Xbox. And then when it released and all this controversy and all this negativity on it, I was like, oh, this is this is never going to come out on the Xbox now. There's no way. And then out of nowhere they're just like, hey, we're going to release it on Xbox. We got this big new update. And even without that big update, I probably still would have played it, just because I like the exploration of it. Going to all these different planets and all these different ecosystems that you'll find. And, there's mining and there's crafting. Obviously, I like to do that stuff. But the one thing that I always thought was kind of cool about it is you can go from the planet, to space, and the space to the planet with, seamlessly. You don't have to just, sit there and wait for a cutscene, like in Destiny or, all these other space games where, they couldn't really do that. So I just, I have to applaud them at least that, they kept chugging away at it. And then before, I was just going to say, there's a couple other series, kind of like Swiss was saying before, that I was thinking of was Tony Hawk, and then the music games like Rock Band and Guitar Hero that they came in like a shotgun shot. They're popular for a few years and then they just fizzle out. Just because there's so many iterations of them. Rock Band was you had 1, 2, 3, and then you had the offshoots like the Beatles and a couple other ones they did. I can't remember what now. I think they had
Green Day,
Green Day.
AC/DC,
Yeah.
Guitar Hero. You had Metallica and Aerosmith, right? Yeah, I mean, a lot of the same comments that we just made about the Toys to Life model, I think you can make about the plastic instrument model as well.
Yeah, that's what I was going to point out. I think it's very similar consumer scenarios.
Yes, and both Activision titles, by the way. It just kind of fizzled out. But, music games have kind of come back. Tony Hawk tried to. Didn't really work out too well for them. Maybe, they'll retool it. One day we'll get another game from Tony Hawk or some kind of at least good skateboarding game. We haven't had one in a while, so we'll see.
A question for you.
Yeah.
Do you ever go on YouTube and search for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater soundtrack?
No, I've never done that.
No, never.
Do you, Swiss?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question. They did.
No comment.
I will have to admit there is a lot of good music though on those in those games, and I wouldn't mind doing it. That was the first time I heard. I think actually that was the first time I heard Motorhead was in one of the Tony Hawk games. And I just never heard it before. I don't see how, because I was always into hard rock and that kind of music. But they did a good job of picking the music, and for that type of game. You're just getting around grinding and stuff, and the music's just like perfect. So it's just me.
All right, gentlemen. Until we get more, admissions and confessions from Swiss here, I think we're going to wrap it up. It's been a good topic, right? Like many times we're not quite sure what we're going to, if we have enough here to make a topic of, but I think there is. The gaming landscape is littered with a lot of tryhards, right? A lot of games that thought they had an audience, that thought they knew what they were doing or building on a model, and that have struggled to find that long tail that we're talking about. Even last week, there was a really good article, kind of a game analysis article on Gamasutra about the World of Warcraft effect, right? We've all talked about this or know about it a little bit, right? The idea of everybody wants to be the next World of Warcraft, right? Or everybody wants to be the next Fortnite. Everybody wants to be the next Minecraft. Rather than, that idea of chasing the popular game in a genre rather than evolving and really being the next being the next Fortnite or being the next World of Warcraft, which is taking a genre and evolving it, polishing it up, evolving it, adapting, right? We've talked about that on this podcast in terms of Fortnite's ability to quickly throw in updates and keep the game fresh and responsive. So I think that there are the lessons that people and publishers may take from Disney Infinity is a great example of that, right? To be the next Skylanders is not to put out more product and dominate the Toys R Us shelves. It's to do something better and different with that than just another button masher action game.
So yeah, 2 quick comments real quick.
Yeah.
So now that you mentioned the Toys of Life, and I didn't even think about it, but we have Starlink coming out, which you have the little toys, but as far as I can tell, you don't need those toys at all, even to go through the game. So I mean, in Skylanders, you kind of need. Well, I'm sorry, Skylanders, Disney Infinity, and Skylanders, you kind of needed those toys. You had to use them, otherwise you wouldn't get the special character or special powers and stuff like that.
So the developers have said you need the toy that comes with the game, that you can finish the game and all the quests with the toy that comes with the game. That you can buy additional pieces to give you different power-ups, but it ends up working more like DLC than it does for being able to unlock certain things. At least that's how they're talking about it now. So we will see, right? And I hope you will see along with us here on the E2KG network as you stick around for the fall and see what games may have that long tail, or what game that you're hyped for that may struggle to find an audience. And I know that we've missed some pretty obvious ones here tonight. So if you're listening or watching, please comment. Let us know what game has surprised you and has lived well beyond its anticipated life cycle, or what game do you want to remind us that should have a long tail that has been forgotten for the ages, or maybe just overlooked, and the servers are still up there with a passionate fan base. So if you're part of that passionate fan base, come join ours. Come join our passionate fan base here on the E2KG network. So for myself, DBQ Hams, Swissguard, and Osiris Prime, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. And we will be back tomorrow night with the E2KG podcast. This is our core show on Tuesdays. It's a playlist show. We're going to hear from Agassically Stamos on his play out of, is it really his turn already? That was relatively quick. That he is reporting out on Call of Duty Ghosts and Battlefield 1 in terms of the single player. And Swissguard, you are up for the assignment this coming week. So join us here on the E2KG network as we force each other to play some other games that are outside of our wheelhouse, or games that we think we should have returned to. Osiris Prime, you've got some GameCube games that you're supposed to be playing, so we'll be waiting for a report from you from next week. All right. So anyhow, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for a good show tonight. And as always, stay here on the E2KG network. We're always going to keep talking, keep conversing, and hopefully be enough to keep you going as well. Good night, everyone.